Picture this: the Roman Empire, the undisputed heavyweight champion of the ancient world. They steamrolled across continents, from the sun-baked sands of Mesopotamia to the misty shores of Britain. Their legions were a force of nature, an unstoppable tide. Yet, there was this one place, this vast, wild expanse of dark, brooding forests and fiercely independent tribes that just refused to be conquered. It remained stubbornly, defiantly beyond their grasp. We're talking about Germania. So the burning question is, why did the legions, the very same ones that had carved out an empire across the known world, suddenly grind to a halt at the Rhine River? What made Germania different? The answer isn't simple. It's a gripping saga of brutal betrayal, a devastating ambush that echoed through history, and a battle so cataclysmic it would haunt the Roman psyche for centuries. For decades, Rome had been steadily pushing deeper into the heart of Germania. This wasn't some haphazard exploration. This was a calculated, strategic expansion. By 12 BCE, brilliant Roman generals like Drusus had established a significant Roman presence, building forts and roads that snaked through the wilderness, extending Roman influence as far as the mighty Elbe River. From the Roman perspective, it seemed like the Germanic tribes were falling into line. They were becoming accustomed to Roman ways, Roman trade, and Roman dominance. The province of Germania seemed like an inevitability, just another matter of time before it was fully integrated into the grand tapestry of the empire. Rome had done this countless times before. They had conquered Gaul, Britannia, Hispania, regions with their own fierce warriors. What could possibly stand in their way now? But Germania was a different beast entirely. This wasn't the open, rolling battlefields of Gaul, where Roman legions could deploy their disciplined formations with devastating effect. This was a land without major cities to besiege or central hubs to capture. No, Germania was a sprawling, untamed wilderness of dense forests, treacherous marshes, and unpredictable terrain. Here, the very strengths of the Roman legions, their tight formations and reliance on clear lines of sight, became their Achilles' heel. They were vulnerable. And the Germanic tribes? They knew this land intimately. It was their home, their sanctuary, and they were about to use it to their immense advantage. The stage was set for disaster in 9 CE. Publius Quinctilius Varus, a Roman governor with a resume that included pacifying Judea, was tasked with consolidating Roman control over this nascent province. He commanded 3 full legions, a staggering force of 15,000 to 20,000 highly trained men, the elite of the Roman military machine. Varus was confident in his mission. He had the trust of a young Germanic chieftain named Arminius, a man who seemed to embody the success of Romanization. Arminius had been raised in Rome, educated in their ways, and, crucially, trained in Roman military tactics. He was a trusted advisor, a supposed ally, a bridge between two worlds. What Varus couldn't imagine was that Arminius was playing a long, dangerous game. This Roman-trained chieftain was secretly uniting the disparate Germanic tribes against their would-be conquerors. He wasn't a loyal ally, he was a master manipulator, a ticking time bomb ready to unleash chaos from within. The trap was sprung in the dense, suffocating embrace of the Teutoburg Forest. Lured by false reports of a local uprising created by Arminius, Varus diverted his legions from their path. As the Roman column, stretched out for miles and weighed down by heavy equipment and camp followers, marched through narrow, muddy paths, the heavens opened. A relentless rain turned the ground into a quagmire, making it impossible to maintain cohesion. And then, the attack began. It was not a pitched battle, but a terrifying storm of ambushes over several days. Germanic warriors, hidden within the trees, struck in waves. They were ghosts in the forest, hitting hard before melting back into the shadows. The Romans, unable to form their renowned defensive squares, found their heavy armor becoming a burden in the mud and chaos. They were cut down, not in glorious battle, but in a desperate, disorienting slaughter. Over 3 agonizing days, the legions were systematically annihilated. Varus, witnessing the utter destruction of his command, fell on his own sword rather than face capture. The few survivors were either brutally sacrificed or condemned to a life of slavery. When news of this disaster reached Rome, It sent shockwaves through the empire. Emperor Augustus, the man who had brought stability after decades of civil war, was said to be utterly devastated. Ancient sources tell us he went months without cutting his hair or beard as a sign of deep mourning. He would reportedly bang his head against the walls of his palace, crying out in anguish, "Quinctilius Varus, give me back my legions." This wasn't just a military defeat, it was a psychological earthquake. Rome had never lost 3 legions so completely in a single disaster. The myth of Roman invincibility was shattered. The Rhine, once seen as a temporary frontier, now became the permanent, unyielding border of the empire. But here's the kicker. Why didn't Rome try again? Why didn't they marshal more legions, unleash their full might, and finish what they had started? This was Rome, after all, a civilization renowned for its tenacity. The answer lies in a complex interplay of military realities, shrewd political calculations, and the unyielding cultural resistance of the Germanic peoples. First, the terrain, a land unsuited for legions. Germania was fundamentally different from any other region Rome had conquered. This wasn't Gaul, with its fertile lands and urban centers that could be integrated into the Roman provincial system. In Germania, there were no major cities to besiege, no central hubs to capture that would break a unified people's will. There were no established roads for legions to march on, no easy pathways for their vast supply trains. Instead, it was a colossal, unforgiving expanse of forests and swamps. Supply lines became a nightmare, stretched thin and vulnerable to ambush. And the tribes themselves? They were masters of their environment. They could melt into the woods when confronted, only to strike again from an unexpected direction, and then vanish. Rome's usual playbook simply didn't work here. They were fighting ghosts in a land that actively conspired against them. Second, the cost, a reckoning of resources and ambition. The Teutoburg disaster starkly revealed just how fragile Roman expansion could be. Emperor Augustus, growing more cautious in his later years, made a pragmatic decision. The risk simply wasn't worth the reward. To continue pouring legions and resources into a seemingly endless war in a land that offered little in return, no rich mines, no thriving cities, no easy tax revenue, was an unsustainable drain on the empire. He pulled back to the Rhine, transforming it into a heavily fortified frontier. His successor, Tiberius, a seasoned general himself, agreed with this policy. Better to consolidate the vast empire they already possessed than to bleed legions dry in a perpetual quagmire. Third, the tribes themselves, fierce independence. Finally, there's the Germanic tribes. They weren't a single unified nation. Instead, they were a mosaic of independent groups, each with its own leaders and rivalries. This decentralized structure made it incredibly difficult for Rome to impose control. There was no single king to defeat or capital city to capture that would bring the entire region to its knees. Even when Rome attempted diplomacy, it often backfired. The heavy-handed Roman rule under Varus, with his attempts to impose Roman law and taxation, had sparked widespread resentment. Attempts to Romanize the locals largely failed. These were people fiercely proud of their independence and warrior traditions. Rome's divide-and-conquer strategy, so effective elsewhere, proved largely ineffective here, as leaders like Arminius could temporarily unite feuding factions against the common Roman threat. Rome did, however, try one last major push to avenge the Teutoburg disaster. Between 14 and 16 CE, Germanicus, the adopted son of Emperor Tiberius, led a series of campaigns deep into Germania. He won battles, marched across the very ground where Varus's legions had fallen, and in a powerful symbolic act, recovered 2 of the lost legionary eagles and buried the bones of the fallen Roman soldiers. This was a moment of immense pride for Rome, a chance to reclaim some of its lost honor. But for all his military prowess, Germanicus couldn't hold the land. The tribes, ever elusive, would retreat, regroup, and continue their resistance. The logistical challenges remained insurmountable, and the cost was simply too high for a sustained occupation. Eventually, Tiberius, recognizing the futility of it all, recalled Germanicus and ended the campaigns. The message was clear. The Rhine frontier, was here to stay. So why did Rome never conquer Germania? It wasn't just one battle or one general's mistake. It was a perfect storm, a confluence of military disadvantage in a hostile land, a pragmatic political realism that weighed cost against benefit, and the unyielding resistance of a people who refused to be assimilated. The legions, for all their might, were ultimately repelled by a land that simply refused to be tamed. In the end, Rome made a choice. They chose to build walls and fortify their borders, instead of trying to conquer a land that resisted their very presence. The Rhine became more than just a river. It became the definitive edge of the Roman Empire, a physical and psychological barrier. Beyond it, the Germanic world remained free, wild, and for Rome, forever unconquered. This decision would profoundly shape the future of Europe, creating a cultural divide that would echo through millennia. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of Roman history's greatest defeats, make sure to like and subscribe. We've got more stories like this on the way. Tales of battles that changed empires and the incredible people who dared to defy them. Leave a comment below and tell us, do you think Rome could have eventually conquered Germania if they had truly committed? Or was it always destined to remain beyond their reach?